Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of the Titfield Thunderbolt, a 1953 Ealing comedy film about the villagers of a village called Titfield trying to run their branch line after it is scheduled for closure. However, a rival bus company attempts to sabotage the railway so that they can get the passengers on their buses, and eventually, within 5 years, the nice little village would become a bit of a bustling town. And so that's basically the plot of the Titfield Thunderbolt, and this is a nice little film. I mean, it's not spectacular, but it's fun, and it's nice for train geeks like me, train lovers and railway lovers, to sit back and watch and see this fun film. It's not particularly amazing, but it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's got a decent story. Funnily enough, the main person who wants to run the railway is the local vicar, I suppose, or preacher, and he's trying to run this railway alongside one of the descendants of the guy who built the original railway. And there's also this supposed ex-driver who's living in an old carriage, and he's a bit of a drunk, and they're funded by this also a rich guy who likes to have a bit of a drink, and they're in competition with these two bus company owners, the bus company owner and his sidekick. And the guys on the railway just have to try and keep the railway as much as they can, whilst the bus drive trying to keep the railway opened and run it themselves, and see if they can, within a month, successfully run the railway. There is this Clark character who is a bit sceptical of the idea, but he eventually, when he hears about the sabotage, he eventually comes to the rescue of the railway. There's also this really nice landlady / bar girl who helps out a lot on the railway lines. Her boyfriend is a steamroller driver played by Sid James, I believe, who was a well-known actor at the time, especially in the Ealing comedy films, and he has a bit of a grudge with the railways for part of the film, although eventually he does help out to the railway's success in the end, on the promise he would get to marry his girlfriend, which is the bar lady, the next day, and therefore he doesn't get into trouble after helping out the bus driver, the bus company people earlier on in the film, when they have their big sabotage moment. He doesn't face any repercussions due to the fact that I suppose he helps them in the end. Although two of the railway people, the rich guy and the ex-driver, after the big act of sabotage, they go and try and steal an actual engine from the main line and get into trouble with the police. But when the bus people see the new locomotive from the museum that they get to replace, the old one that they destroyed, then they get caught as well and inadvertently blab about it. I suppose. I mean, they don't actually say it on screen, but one of the accomplices basically saying, "I didn't do nothing. It wasn't me." And the policeman's like, "What wasn't you?" And I suppose after that's how they found out about it. Whilst the clerk guy was also trying to stop it, I suppose, and he was originally arrested for being suspected of causing the attack, but the vicar gets him out because he has the influence to help. And get some nice people, some nice guys helping out about as well. There's this bishop who comes along to help. He's a friend of the vicar, and he ends up being the fireman when the former driver and the rich guy get into trouble. And funnily enough, the police, because the bus driver people trust their bus into the police wagon, all 4 of the prisoners then have to be transferred to the town by train. So they have to do that. This does delay the train a little bit, but they eventually they manage to make up a little bit of time. And it's got some really fun moments where these problems that they have to overcome, they will try and do it, like when the train bashes through the truck and the steamroller, and then when a water fountain gets holes in it, the passengers and crew have to go and get water from the river, and they have to get these all pots and pans and bathtub and store bedpan warmers. They have to bring them to the river, get the water and take them to the train, otherwise it's going to blow up because they left the fire on. And then at one point with a couple of the brakes system with the new Titfield Thunderbolt train and the carriage, and they have some problems there. And at one point the brakes from the brake van causes the rope to break, and the train keeps going on for a bit, but they managed to get them hooked up back together with the new chain from the steamroller and they have to improvise the situation. But in the end, it's just a fun little adventure. A nice little story about some people trying to keep their railway running, and it's just very nice. It's not going to be spectacular, but there are some great moments, like that great model shot of the train coming off the rails. That was really cool, and it's got some great scenes, and it looks really nice. But I don't think it's going to account to anything spectacular, apart from the fact that nowadays you could look back and say this was sort of an early version of what volunteers would do at heritage and preserved railways that we go to now, and well, certainly in the UK and a couple in the US go, and maybe India as well. We go and travel on them for fun, for days out, and have some good times. So this is this railway does stay part of the nationalised network, part of the mainline companies. Well, not companies, but it's connected to the main lines. It's not a heritage railway, but it could definitely could be the inspiration for them, except that they're volunteered, privately run, either by amateurs or former railway workmen and drivers and stuff, or people who've had experience at least. And yeah, nowadays they're a very popular tourist attraction thing, and most of them are running on former tracks that have been lifted. It'd be very nice to go to. It'd be even nicer if some of those old lines were rebuilt and reopened. Maybe the Heritage Railway could provide some special trains alongside as the services on those lines. But but it's the next best thing, I suppose. Even if most of them aren't very long, but still got some great stuff in the film, and it's got some great inspiration for the Heritage Railways opening later on. And yeah, it's a fun, enjoyable film. It's got some great stuff, but the film isn't really spectacular. It's not really going to lit the world on fire. It's just a really enjoyable, really entertaining story. But I don't think there's much that stands out, to be honest, apart from the model shot of the train crashing into the tracks. But it just looks really nice, and it is an entertaining film. So I'm going to give the Titfield Thunderbolt a 7 out of 10. I really enjoyed it, but I don't think it's going to be anything. It's not spectacular. It's not one of the classic Ealing comedies. Well, it's not one of the ones considered a classic. But it's nor is it part of the Carry On films, which, if not considered a classic, at least it's still part of that franchise. It's still regarded as part of that. This is just one of the lesser well-known Ealing comedies, but it's still a really good and really enjoyable one nevertheless, and has some really good stuff. It's just a shame nothing is really that stand out about it, but it's still an enjoyable, fun film for an hour and 25 minutes or just under. So, some good stuff. So, anyway, that's it from my review of the Titfield Thunderbolt. I hope I wasn't too harsh on it, but there wasn't a huge amount of standing out from standout scenes, apart from the sabotage bit where the train goes off the tracks. That was a really good model shot. But besides that, it's not really that stand out, but it will appeal to railway lovers like me. So it will still be a really fun and really enjoyable film, nevertheless. And yeah, and like Space Chimps 2, I had a good time with that film, but I didn't think that was a very good plot, and that's why that film went to a 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10, similar to the first film with a 5 out of 10. This one, I think it's got a good story, fun, enjoyable, but it's nothing spectacular, and that's why it's a 7. And I almost gave it an 8, as you'll probably see in the bloopers, but ultimately it just didn't work out that way. I still think it's better than The Man with the Golden Gun, which is another 7 out of 10 I reviewed recently, but I just think, I mean, if there was a few more standout scenes, maybe this film would have been an 8 or a 9, but as it is, it's just a really great 7, a high 7 I would say, almost was an 8. I did think about it, but in the end I just had to go with a 7, because it wasn't it didn't really stand out that much. But it's still very good and very enjoyable, and I think people will like it, even if they're not going to love it. So, I think have to be a cold-hearted person not to like it, though. And that's comedy's not... I mean, it's not even that humorous. It's supposed to be an Ealing comedy, but it's not even that much of a comedy. I mean, if the genre to set in, it probably would be comedy, but it's not quite as comedic as some of the other ones. I suppose maybe... I'm not sure what other genre you could put it in than comedy, but it isn't as comedic as some of the other films from Ealing Studios, both at the time and before and after. Before, after, and at the time. So, well, that's another thing. It's supposed to be a comedy, but there isn't and that's the genre. I suppose that's the one genre I could probably put it in, but there isn't a huge amount of comedic moments. Not that I want to see people tripping over each other every single second, or having a joke every other minute, but maybe throwing a bit more comedic stuff in just to reassure us it is a comedy. But it's still a good and enjoyable story. So yeah, and I thought the characters were pretty good as well. So that's cool, and the acting is also well done throughout, and yeah, and a lot of great location work and some decent stock footage uses. I mean, some dodgy, but mostly decent, and some pretty good sets as well. Although they did make that train cab look a bit too big in some bits. But anyway, that's it. All finished. Now, that's it. Properly done. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. See me? But I don't think it's going to be spectacular, so I'm going to give it. I'm thinking a 7 because it wasn't really that spectacular. But you know, it's a fun, enjoyable story. So I'll give it an 8. I'll be nice. I'm going to give the Titfield Thunderbolt a 8 out of 10. Yeah, I was thinking of 7, but I think that might be looking a bit too harsh on something that's just a little simple and... No. I'll change that score. I'll change it to 20. So I'm going to pass the...